How the Game of Thrones showrunners pissed off the fans. Again! Now, it's no secret how far the legacy of the Game of Thrones show has fallen since its final season aired earlier this year. At its heyday, Game of Thrones was the quintessential water cooler show. Viewers and fans pored over every minute detail, reading up on every new development and tracking every theory, like why did the White Walkers need babies and what was the significance of all the spirals? Side note, it turns out none of that really mattered. Hell, it was so popular, it even made people read books, actual physical books. Like, who does that, am I right? However, for many fans, those warm, fuzzy feelings were muddied by the final season, which many perceived as, what's the polite word here? Rushed? Yeah, we'll go with rushed. With most of the outrage aimed squarely at the series creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss for not taking the time to bring logical, earned endings to characters and plots. And when upset fans thought they'd be able to hear some sort of explanation from Benioff and Weiss at this year's San Diego Comic-Con, they were further frustrated when D&D ducked out of their Hall H panel at the last minute, possibly to avoid what would become an awkward situation. Well, now the writing, producing, and directing duo have come out of hiding to appear at Austin Film Festival, where they discuss the show, its beginnings, and how it appeared to succeed despite everything going wrong. And guess what? This did nothing to alleviate fan anger. So, what all happened and what did they say? Well, before we get too far, it's worth noting that while thankfully the whole thing was live tweeted by Twitter user @4Arya, there aren't any verbatim quotes or transcripts of the event, so bear in mind that things may have been lost in translation a bit. That being said, let's break down some of the highlights. The event started off on the rails with Benioff admitting that they got the idea to cast Jason Momoa as Khal Drogo from fan casting sites, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a fan who didn't like that casting. However, things quickly took a turn when the duo discussed the problems they ran into, as well as the mistakes made during the first season of the show. Reportedly, when they met with A Song of Ice and Fire series author George R.R. Martin to get his blessing to make the show, they remarked that they weren't sure why he trusted them with his life's work, a statement that feels very poignant to fans who disliked the final season. They also admitted that their original attempt at a pilot had basic writing mistakes and that they made mistakes in everything they could have, from scripting to casting to costumes. In fact, they believe the only reason the dismal pilot went through was because of the strong foreign pre-sales that HBO had for the series. Okay? They basically boiled down that the production of the show was a very expensive film school for the two of them, essentially a learning experience. It also turns out that episodes were coming in really short on time, averaging about 39 minutes an outing. And it was only after HBO was like, ugh, guys, you need to add about another 100 minutes of footage to the season, that the two showrunners realized that there were literally no scenes of Cersei and her husband, Robert Baratheon, together, and it was these extra minutes that they added that helped them understand the characters better. We're not going to touch that. Yeah, we're just not going to respond to that. Is that fine? Okay, great. Moving on from that, they elaborated on their writing process, which seemed like an interesting dynamic. Basically, they started off just writing, and as a tweet said, but as things went on, we had to outline. The tweet goes on that they divvied up scripts. They didn't work together in the same room. One took first half, the other took the last half, and then they would swap. As for why they wrote it all themselves to start, it was because they didn't know better before HBO pushed them to have other writers. I'm sorry, this is insane. Okay, luckily their saving grace seemed to be the actors they hired for the roles. One tweet read, Dan is saying that he let the actors redefine the roles, especially Maisie, and they began writing for the actors. It's like the actor moved into the house and redecorated. He said he learned about the characters from the actors. But there's a whole book that they could read where they could learn about the characters. We know this. Of course, fans shouldn't be surprised to hear that the pair were actively avoiding feedback from the show's audience. Were you listening to the feedback to your fans as things went along? Dan, we really did not. Dan doesn't see the value of considering other people's reactions. Dave acknowledged that he Googled the show and it upset him. As for the rich fantasy world created by George R.R. Martin, one tweet definitely had some crushing information. Dan wanted to remove as many fantasy elements as possible because we didn't want to appeal to that type of fan. What type of fan would that be? Oh, they get into it. They wanted to expand the fan base to people beyond the fantasy fan base, to mothers and NFL players. Okay. Because, that's shitty. Because we're pretty sure plenty of mothers and NFL players love fantasy. Football fans certainly do. That's why they play fantasy football. But perhaps the most damning thing of all was when the moderator asked, did you really sit down and try to boil the elements of the book down? Did you really try to understand its major elements? And their reply was, not surprisingly, no, we didn't. The scope was too big. It was about the scenes we were trying to depict, and the show is about power. Well, that just sucks, y'all. Honestly, it sounds like the series being successful and as good as it was in spite of them instead of because of them, and it seemed to be a result of a talented team and passionate craftsmen. Overall, while the final season of the series might have ruined the experience for some fans, we're still grateful to all the people who worked their hardest to make this show the wild ride it was. And we'll have to see if fans are forgiving and willing to come back to the property when HBO moves forward with its spin-offs. But what do you folks think? Do you think this did anything to alleviate fan outrage? Was the final season really that bad? And will you watch any Game of Thrones spin-off series? Let's discuss. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, why not give us a like and subscribe? If you want to get notified every time we go live with a show or drop a new video, feel free to mash that little bell so you can be up to date on all the latest theories, news, and rumors in the pop culture world.